good.
And welcome back, everybody, to the final Net.lol podcast of the year. Joined, as always, by Mr. Nadeau, Mr. Mestry, and Mr. Tucker. I am Brent Salisbury. We're going to take you on this holiday tour. And we've got one of our favorite return guests, Mr. Roy Chua. Roy knows where all the bodies are buried in the
Right now,
valley.
where everything's at.
He does.
I buried them. I buried them. That's
He
all I
buried
know.
some too, yeah.
He buries bodies daily. He's got a big body count. I like it. He's a serial technology killer.
Yeah.
So, Roy, what's
Back
up?
to the show, man.
How are you, my friend? It's good to see your smile.
I'm good. I'm glad to be back here in California, I guess. And it's been
You've been all over the place.
I have been all over the place, just like.
Would you say 8 weeks of travel now? That must be a world
starts
record for this year, by the way, from how much
for me-
everybody's
for
been
me-
traveling.
I haven't
Yeah, no,
left
it
the
started
county
mid-October.
in 3 years. So, yes. So Roy's gonna do the traveling for us and talk
Right.
about.
I've traveled for friends. Yeah,
Yeah, so
Yeah,
he's
started
going to do
with
a
Singapore.
brain dump on all the conferences he's been to and kind of start out with a retrospective here on what he's seeing. He's one of the best analysts out there. And so, yeah, we'll give links to where to find Roy. So, Roy, what are you seeing?
What's the
Yeah,
hot
I mean, I think hot topic, Tom. I would say, 2022, from what I'm seeing at the conferences, I think a couple of the usual things, right? I think we're still in cloud transition. It's been many, many years, but we're still transitioning to the cloud. And depending on whose stats you believe, we're only 10% transition or 20% transition, because they always look at,
Is
at the
it
cloud
always
spend.
in, or are people leaving or transitioning to a hybrid too? I'm
This-
curious.
Yeah, so I think when we talk about cloud, again, it depends on the qualify before the word cloud, right? Is it public cloud? Is it private cloud? Is it the cloud platform? Is it, and that therein lies the complexity, right? And yes, there is repatriation, right? I mean, of course, you could have a complicated word for that, right? What they call cloud repatriation, meaning take your workloads back. But I think it's a bit more complicated than that. We're seeing the use of maybe the same orchestration control layer that's actually public cloud, but your workloads are running locally, right? You also have the opposite where you have your control layer be your own, like, pick your favorite, Red Hat OpenShift or, VMware Tanzu or whatever it is, right? Pick your favorite, or Rancher or whatever, right? Platform. I mean, there's a whole bunch of those. But the actual underlying hardware includes public cloud IaaS, right? Or CAS, right? So I think it's getting more complicated. But this whole cloud thing continues. I think what I do see is cloud is a complicated term, but there is a mindset element to it. There's a process element to it. There's an infrastructure element to it. There's a business model element to it. So I think, when we talk cloud,
That's the interesting part I was going to ask you about, because there was actually a really good blog article that I read. I forget who it was. It was wasn't the dude who was at Dropbox. It was something like that, though. It was a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And he actually did this interesting analysis of, if you go with the assumption everybody has is the cloud is cheaper and easier and let's go. And he did this interesting analysis because they were a small company that started and kind of grew as they went. And his analysis was really interesting in that he found that other than bursty workloads, it was cheaper. Not just, I mean, not like this week, but for long-term workloads that he was using, it was far cheaper to just buy the equipment and colo it, something like that. And that was a really interesting juxtaposition that was like, wow, all of a sudden different, I don't know if you're seeing more of that.
Isn't it always going to be a pendulum, right? I mean, I think for the medium enterprise, it's like, do you really want to manage your own gear? If you do, then it takes discipline and it takes process and all those kind of hard things. But yeah, there's cost.
Well, what was interesting too is it's not just the cloud is like a binary thing, it's out there or it's in here. And he was also talking about things like Equinix or that sort of thing where you can rent
options.
The hardware, you can colo, you can there's a spectrum here. It's not just
There
in the
is.
cloud or not,
There
right?
is. There is. And historically, AWS has avoided using the word cloud continuum, but I'm seeing that appear in some of their talking, their blogs, which is there is a continuum. And the reality is that in the continuum, who owns the hardware, who owns orchestration, who owns the different layers. I think you have to be smart about that consumption. I think the reality as we go into 2023 is I think there will be an education and there'll be a reevaluation of what's the most appropriate. The ironic thing is because of AWS and Azure, right, and GCP, people are educated about the cloud. And when you get educated, ironically, you're in a better position to determine when you don't want to use that public cloud, right?
Right.
It's interesting, right? I mean, that's what I tell the telcos, right? Telcos are historically like no to hyperscalers, right? Nah, it's like,
Yeah.
and now it's a little different. And what I tell the telcos is, if you don't engage and you don't work with the GCP or the Azure or the AWSs of the world, you'll never learn.
You
And
won't know.
the interesting is you wouldn't know. But if you actually do it and you learn and you're smart about it, now you can figure out when you take advantage of it and when you don't, and
It,
how you take advantage of it.
and that's been
That's
interesting in the context of 5G. Exactly what you said. Like the customers I've worked with over the last couple of years, it's back to the binary thing. Like, should I either go in the cloud or run this all myself? And what they're realizing is this hybrid cloud thing we've been banging on about for like 5 years or something now is actually what
right.
should be thinking about, right?
That's correct. But again, the reality is that it's easier when you do 0 and it's easier when you do 1. The
Yeah.
0.675, right, or 0.618, right, or the whatever it is, right? That's a lot harder unless you know what the 0 and the 1 is, right? I think that's the reality. And so my take is you need to know what 0 is, you need to know what 1 is. And then the in between, you can decide what aspects of 0 do you bring along and what aspects of 1 you bring along, and that's sort of where you are. And I think that to me has been the learning of the last couple of years. And now in the conversations that I've been having across all these conferences, right, ranging from very telco specific, to very hyperscaler specific conferences to the middle enterprise in between, I think that learning is happening. So I think cloud as a theme is definitely one of those things that I'm seeing across the board. How you use cloud. I mean, cloud we're now using as like a noun, like cloud, right? We're using it as a verb, right? I don't know. I'm going to cloud you. I don't know.
Or cloudify it,
Cloudify you.
like
Yeah,
that,
I'm going to
yeah.
cloudify, right? But yeah, that's definitely one of the themes. And I mean, I think the other one that I'm seeing is this connectivity of everything, right? And not just IoT, because again, 2022 is a year of IoT, 2023 is a year of IoT, 2019 was a year of IoT, so was 1997, right? Whatever, I know,
Right.
but it's always been that way. But connecting people, connecting devices, and everything to the resources that are out there, networking, those things, I think that's an ongoing theme. We're seeing a lot of elements of that. How do we connect everything, and how do we connect them securely? How do we manage them? How do we manage people? I think that's been critical, and I think this couple of years we've learned how important connectivity is, right? As an industry, from the pandemic to the wars, unfortunately, right? Connectivity is important. It's a lifeline, right? So I think seeing a lot of that realization and also the multiple axes of communications connectivity. And I'm seeing now sort of multimodal realization of multimodal by the general public, right? By enterprises. So it's not just DSL anymore that Brent has, right? It's sorry, that was a bad dick. Yeah. I'm not much better than you, right? With
Yeah.
Yes.
Cable in the valley. Yeah.
Yeah, or Tom, who's going to get fiber, which I'm envious about, right? It's not just DSL, right? It's not copper or DSL cable fiber. It's also satellite now. Everyone knows what LEO is, right? Before you ask LEO, it's like which LEO? Like it's like now LEO is like, oh yeah, everyone knows low Earth orbit satellites, right? Yeah. And now that your iPhone can call through satellites for emergency services, people are like, oh yeah, sure, of course, it makes sense. I mean, right? So this multimodal connectivity, I think the carriers are realizing it, enterprises are realizing it, consumers are realizing it, right?
I mean, that'll be interesting next year to see. That's one of the things I was thinking about that's emerging. We're working on the European version of what you're describing, and It'll be really interesting to see how well it actually works in practice. I mean, you put a constellation of satellites up that your phone is supposed to talk to, and
Yeah.
and you're supposed to have a more than a 911 phone call on at
Right.
some point. I mean, there's actually data. Whoa, sorry. There's actually data access channel,
Yes.
and it's just a
Yeah.
normal wireless access point.
Hmm.
I wonder how well that's going to actually work, though, with the delay and everything. But we'll find out.
But with Leo, yeah, I mean, with Leo, we're talking about 40 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, right? It's up to 70 milliseconds. That's actually not horrible, right? It's probably no
It
worse.
depends on the wireless, how the wireless architecture is set up. I mean, as we all
Right.
know, I mean, 4G, 5G is the most complicated network configuration invented to date, and all of those moving parts, the whole roaming
Yep.
action.
Yep.
I mean, what does roaming mean, when you've got, I mean, I-
It's definitely interesting, but I think the consumers are now expecting that. It's like, oh yeah, of course, yeah, sure, yeah, yeah, fixed wireless access, yeah, of course, like it's very interesting things that we were dreaming about. Like now, us consumers are like, yeah, of course, yeah, sure, satellite, yeah, sure, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
fixed wireless, yeah, sure, fiber, yeah, I mean, so the cool thing is we have all these connectivity techniques, right? But then the question is, what do we do with them? How do you unify them? How do you manage them, right? How do you track quality of service across all of these things? And how do you make sure that they reach all the people they're supposed to reach,
mm,
right? And the cost-effective manner. I think that's the part that's still, you would think we figured that out by now in the U.S., but we still don't have good maps of the last mile, right? I mean, there's evidence, right? I mean, come
yeah.
on.
Brent's
So,
house.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the whole wireless is going to fix the world. The only thing I care about it with is that it's going to drive carriers to actually invest in infrastructure,
Yeah.
like because
yeah.
they'll see the writing on the wall. They'll start losing customers. I mean, it's interesting, obviously, for far edge and IoT,
Hmm.
but anything that's going to drive competition is going to
No, I think it's good. I mean, I think competition is good. I mean, you could buy yourself a $500 starter kit and then pay 50, $60 a month and you get satellite, right? I mean, Brent could, if depending on your latitude, right? But maybe you could, right? And
Yeah.
and soon there'll be
until it
tens of thousands of
oversubscribes.
satellites. I mean,
Well, it's
the thing,
interesting too is there's a lot like we had my buddy Corey on a couple of weeks ago, and he's rolling out a big fiber ring in Colorado
mm,
to basically to address the same thing we're talking about, which is
yeah,
connectivity, and the telcos have largely failed to light up or connect, however we want to put it,
hmm,
folks that are further out of the metro areas,
yeah,
and
agreed.
it's really interesting how like all of these creative solutions are coming out of the woodwork now. We're not going to just
They are.
wait for cable or whoever to
That's right.
bring it, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's there's a lot more fiber, right? And getting the underserved or the underserved or unserved. I think those are important, right? New techniques, microtrenching. I mean, a lot of creativity with connectors and the like, and I think that's good. I think that's maybe we can catch up we can become a first world in connectivity finally, right? Right. So
Hopefully,
develop hopefully, right? Unlike like some of the other nations that came behind us and now are fully connected, high speeds, and it's pretty sad, right? Because on speaking of travel and connectivity,
hmm
I was back home in Singapore in my parents' house, my dad, right? And
oh,
and I
they've had gig there for a long time, right?
I know, exactly, right? And so I'm just doing a speed test on my laptop. I'm like, it's
Like,
half a gig down,
is
half a
this
gig up.
broken?
I'm like,
I'm
that's
on a
nice.
LAN.
Then I use his desktop, right? And that's the limit of his Wi-Fi. I use his desktop as a gig down, as a gig up. So I'm like, hey, Dad, how much do you pay for this? Like $40 a month is part of the bundle.
$50, yeah.
I'm like, it's a gig down, a gig up symmetric, and here I've struggled to. I mean, my
Yeah.
best case is like 35 megabits up, right? And I'm like, how long is
If
the
you're
backup?
lucky.
Right?
Yeah.
If I'm lucky, right? And like, and because everyone uses cloud backup, right? Your photos and everything. I'm sitting there
hmm
and like looking at this thing going up, and it's really slow, right?
Yep.
Those 4K videos take a long time to upload, right? And meanwhile, back in Singapore, my dad's got like, yeah, I don't know what I got. I'm like, well, you got
Yeah.
gigs and what you got,
So
right?
fast it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that's pretty sad, right? So in some sense, I'm here. Here I am in Silicon Valley, right? Yeah,
Yep.
right. That's what I
The
got.
And you
worst
would
cell
think you would
service
have
in
at
the
least
world.
that, right?
I should be 10 gig. I should be like, yeah, I could go one. Then I got 10. Yeah, hundreds
Right.
coming next week, right? I mean,
Right.
where is my 100 gig to my house?
I mean, how are you going to check your email at your wine tasting, Roy? I mean,
Right. Come on.
so you mentioned security, network security. What were you seeing in your travels around that front? I feel like it's
Yeah.
all over the place, and that's kind of where the cheese has moved and the value prop of networking. Like networking is just table stakes now, and it's how do you integrate a
Or
security and
detracting
services.
from the value as
It
we've
is.
had disasters right this year.
We had a lot of disasters around security, network breaches, and the like, right? I mean, I think there's two levels. Speaking of sort of cloud connectivity and security, I think a couple of things. One is that connectivity at the physical layer, we've talked about, all those new modes of access and management of that. The next layer up is sort of the application, right? The user to application connectivity, application to application connectivity. And what we're seeing across those areas is increased complexity. I mean, you guys are experts in this area, right? So the container connectivity, VM connectivity, server connectivity, that's an ongoing challenge, right? And all the way up to the application and our favorite service meshes or not, right? Which complicate the story or simplify the story depending on whether the application guy or networking guy, right? Or security guy. I think that
Just as you mentioned service mesh, Kyle drops. That's his
yeah,
favorite.
no, he probably knew it was going to come, right? It's like service mesh.
Mastery. You just had to avoid the mastery jokes, is all.
Hey, he
But
dropped. It's we can make fun of him while he's here, but no, seriously, like, how are
it's
those
just,
things like? When you've talked to folks, is that impacting like business decisions? Are they hesitating to go into areas, or what's the impact? I guess is
I think
that
I think security. That there's a couple of things. Speaking of security, I think enterprises, aside from connectivity, which is one of the things that they dealt with through the pandemic, the big one right now is security. I mean, you're absolutely right. Security in the cloud, security of the factories, security of my OT assets, security of my IT assets, security of mobile, security. Security of my employee at home, right? I mean,
Mm,
look, when you have some major firewall vendors offering basically, hey, if you buy this little box for your employee, I'll throw in a free license for home security simultaneously on their home network, right? When you have that kind of offerings, then you know that it's a big problem, right? It's like, secure your employee and we'll secure their home for free, right? And
yeah,
their home network for free. So I think that is an issue. And what does it impact? I think it impacts from a CISO standpoint. It impacts I, I don't think it stops them from rolling stuff out. I think the rollouts continue. Productivity, business dictated. I think what it does is it scares them on a daily basis and the CIO on a daily basis, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it, right? That the fear is at very, very high levels, and they're not sure what to do. Because the reality is that the employees are going to work from home. You're not going to stop them. The
right,
employees are going to go mobile. You can't stop them. All your IT, OT assets are going to be there, right? Because exactly. You're going to protect Brent at home. You have to
Yeah.
secure him. Now that may be
Nobody's going
impossible.
back. It's
I know,
insane.
but it's not.
everyone here
So
is remote on this
Yeah.
call,
yeah, exactly. I'm remote, right?
For
I'm
certain.
remote. Exactly.
and it
But yet you have
works.
to secure them. And so what we're seeing is this looking at all the different solutions and that the vendors are touting, right? So, you got SD-WAN. No, SD-WAN not enough. You got to go to SASE. Wait, SASE too much. Come back to SSE. I'm happy to go into what all those acronyms mean, but you can look them up, right? Just go to some vendor's website or
They're
some other
just
analyst.
VPNs,
They're like VPN. Well,
of a
VPN no
flavor,
good, Tom. But VPN no good. You need ZTNA, right?
right?
Don't do VPN. ZTNA, right? That's the way to go, right? Zero trust
But it's
everything.
interesting. Like I've talked to a good friend of mine's a CIO at a pharmaceutical place, a big pharmaceutical place you heard of, and in talking to him, it's sort of like it's whack-a-mole, really. It's like you were describing it earlier, kind of tongue in cheek, but that's really like you were describing. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how he's like,
I have a
well,
graph. Yeah. I have this chart, right? And I have these giant circles, right? ZTNA, SASE, SSE, right? And when you put them all together, right, you still have holes everywhere
Dug
else,
out
and
holes, yeah.
that's your attack surface, right? You got hole. You can't cover all the holes. Doesn't matter your XDR, your CASB, your SWIG, all these horrible acronyms. The fact you have so many acronyms is a problem in and of itself, right? But the fact that when you put all these up together, you still have holes. It's hard. And then you're like, we'll roll out AI. Guess what? Every security vendor has AI ML. We'll look at the logs. We'll find anomalies, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, good luck.
The folks on the other side have AI too, right? And the folks on the other side have AI too. We're going to automate attacks. We're going to attack you. It's going to be autonomous. The thing's going to figure out where your holes are. And the problem is this asymmetry that we've known in security for the last 30 years, which is I have to protect everything 100% all the time. And they have to get through just one time.
One thing.
That's it.
Yeah.
One thing, right? That asymmetry is horrendous. And so what we're hearing now in my conversations with enterprise CISOs and probably your friend is that there's two, I would say there's probably two elements, right? One is you add observability. So you telemetry, right? So gather stuff, try to use AI to help because there's 0 days, there's all these things you can never patch fast enough, even though you try.
Yeah, auditing trails are a big deal. That like this
That's
is the thing. We do testing and security at my place, and that's a big thing that a lot of people are very insistent on. Finally, everything must be auditable, and it used to be that they would do that because of like regulatory or financial reasons, but now it's exactly what you're talking about. We don't know what we don't know, and we want to make sure we can go and find it later if something does happen.
Observability, telemetry is important. Management of that data lake, right, is important. Consolidating, reducing number of vendors, that's important. And then applying AI, ML, big data analytics, right? It's not perfect, but it'll give you something, and it reduces the human workload. I think that's one of the elements I'm saying. The second one is use managed services because not everyone can hire, recruit, retain the right security folks. And there are economies of scale. The attack on the other side, there are playbooks. And there are people who understand these playbooks. And so you can mitigate probably 95% of the attack, finding the right managed security, whatever solution, right? Because not everyone has the ability to do it in-house. I think that's the one thing. Ask for help. It's okay, right?
These are all the recipes for success for enterprises, by the way.
Exactly.
I mean, service providers can manage to hire people to do this kind of stuff, but
that's right. There's economies of scale because and there's cost savings jointly because they once they learn it, they can replicate it because they can use automation too to protect you, right? It works both ways. And then finally is assume the resilience part. Assume you will be breached, right? And have a playbook and know what you're going to do when you're breached so that you can do it should be a process, right? You're not going to be breached. You can protect against it. You can mitigate it. You can compartmentalize it, reduce the impact. But now you got to go through and fix it, right? And then recover from it and make sure you do backups. Make sure you practice recovery, right? It's no good to write these wonderful things.
It's a funny thing you say that, but like I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of days ago, and he is a crack engineer on any level, right? He used to run IT at a service provider and stuff too. Yeah. And we were talking about his backup strategy randomly the other day, and said, well, yeah, I've got everything on a UPS and it's all cool, and he's got industrial strength UPSs, rack mount, etc. He said, I have them too. Have you tried running the battery down to 0 and see what happens?
Yeah.
And you usually will fry the battery, and then you will not recover. I said, the best way to do the recovery, pull the batteries out of your UPS and see what happens. But you're right. I mean, they're like they're all of these scenarios. They're expensive and complicated to go through, and back to managed services,
You have to run through them. You have to have a cold or warm standby. You have to keep it up to date. And every quarter or every 6 months, actually, do the chaos monkey thing, right? Pull that plug, right? Let it blow up, right? And then see what happens and recover from it. Because if you don't practice, it's like the drill. If you don't drill,
the live drill.
Live drill. You have to do. I mean, that's the thing. You take the impact, unfortunately, because when it actually happens, you better be prepared. I think because you will be breached. Everyone will get breached. I'm probably breached right now, right? So maybe
it's interesting. Like a friend of mine and I came up with this security model a long time ago. We were at BT. We called it inside out, which is assume the network is compromised at all times.
Yeah.
and authenticate to individual services, just like you do if they're outside of your network.
Exactly.
But don't trust anything
That's right.
by default, you know.
That's right. I mean, the zero trust thing has been around for a long time. It started, way back when Jericho Forum 2003. That started a company in 2004, Identity and Network Access Management, and it was zero trust before zero trust, right? Before Forrester coined it. We already had that principles, least privilege, the defense in depth, layered security, right? And all those things were there. But zero trust is
But it still goes on today. People just assume, oh, you're in the network, it's cool, do whatever you want to do, right?
That's right. No,
or you're in a lab, or you're in some magical physical facility, and not really.
I mean, it could be Tom, it could be Brent. It may not be Brent. It could be a deep fake. I mean, I could be a deep fake, right? I mean, I'm not sure.
Right.
But yeah, right. I mean,
to which it's a problem, really. Yeah, I mean,
that's
like you were saying earlier. Like for telcos or large enterprises, they have the wherewithal to handle a lot of this stuff. They can hire people, they can, et cetera. Well, yeah, and like Dave was saying, maybe I'm saying potential, Dave, not.
Yeah. Well, you just reminded me, I think we have COVID to thank for a lot of where we are right now, and this wonderful intersection of connectivity and networking being super important, which is quite funny. But when Roy was talking about connectivity, I had flashbacks to in the early 2000s working at BT doing installs for teleworkers, because that's what they were called back then. And it was you had a leased line that was paid for by the company. And on the end of that was a router paid for by the company. Which had a DSL backup. And you were hooked into that thing directly with a cable, with port security, and all of those good things. And then you knew, okay, the thing on the end of this is the corporate PC, which is the only thing which is allowed to be connected to it. Yeah. And, COVID happens, everything gets online, the cloud, HTTPS everywhere, all of these are all good things, and we still haven't got anywhere close to the type of security that we had back in the early 2000s, where we had those dedicated leased lines for teleworkers. We're needing to see this kind of go full circle, and that pendulum's going to swing back, but what's going to fill those gaps, I think, is still a TBD for 2023. I think it will be fun to see what happens.
Agreed. I think we'll. I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think, unfortunately, we're just gonna have to work hard. Unfortunately, we're gonna patch one thing at a time. I think there's no magic silver bullet. The reality is it's hard work, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. This is what we've learned, right? There's always hard work involved. There's no easy button, easy solution. Anyone that pretends otherwise, I think it's just making stuff up, right?
It's fine. You can pull an Elon Musk and demand everybody come back to the office to use the super secure internal network all the time. That'll work.
That'll solve it all.
Yeah, that's the convert office to with mattresses solution, right? It's if you live here and you work here and I secure the building, it's secure, right? I mean, you would think, right? So,
but Dave's point is apropos. It's that that solution, soup to nuts, was. It was secure, but it was also relatively simple compared to these massive microservices blah things that are out there that are running your SASE service or whatever we were talking about, and it's if you look back on the teleworker stuff, every aspect of that was understood and looked at and made sure it was secure, etc.
Yep.
That's really what's missing, and that because of the way we develop software now, it's a continuous thing, just like software development. You don't just check security, we're cool, we're done, next, Yeah.
No, it's ongoing. And I think part of it's because we wanted acceleration, we wanted agility, we wanted flexibility, right? Because to run that lease line, to provision that, at least 2-3 months, right? To provision.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a lot of manual, but it's also, during those steps, there are people checking everything out, and it usually, it's not guaranteed, but it's, and there's so few relatively, now we say this, there's so few steps and so few things, right? I mean, that was considered rocket science, when I was at BT after Dave was, and we got the turn up time for these circuits to go from months to weeks, And that was like, oh my God, an achievement. But it still required all of that, processing to happen, even though we
Okay.
started automating it, right?
It does.
Not,
It does.
but you still have to do the work.
You have
That's
to.
the thing.
The CIO today says, all right, well, Tom just moved from, I don't know, East Coast to West Coast. Tom's now, he's got to be turned on tomorrow, right? He's got to be on
Yeah.
tomorrow, right? And
But what does that mean?
yeah. And he's got to be connected, secure, ready to go tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's got to be so.
The demands change.
Yeah.
Like everything is so much more demanding now. It's like it is instant. We've got used to that now with faster internet speeds and everything. It's like if it doesn't happen in 2 or 3 hours, it may as well not happen. So yeah, like provisioning leased lines, like what a pain in the ass that was. when the employee leaves, right? You have to get the whole thing deprovisioned. Somebody needs to drill a freaking hole in my house to put the line in. Like that. People don't tolerate stuff like that today.
No.
So
Right.
It's going to be interesting to see if we can ever get something analogous to that.
We have to run at
Keeping
hyperspeed.
those consents separate, right?
Yeah.
Home network, work network, separate. That would be nice.
Yeah, and it's going to get solved at the edge. I mean, it's like everything else. It's
right.
trickling down. This
We
is
haven't talked about
fascinating.
edge computing.
Good stuff.
That's the other thing that comes up, edge computing. I mean, but that's really fundamentally distributed computing, right? Once you understand that 0 and a 1, that the cloud and not, then that's in between. And now you put new islands in place where you can run computing because you need that latency or you need it in a specific location because of data sovereignty rules and the like. So I think we're seeing the learnings of how to manage big clouds to distributed clouds. And that's going to be pretty exciting because of the connectivity aspects, because of the security aspects as well, simultaneously, right? More locations to secure. The CISO was saying, yes, great, like, bring it on, right? So, but yeah, I think, I mean,
until then, CISOs are going to be forced at just throwing $1 million at every new project.
It's horrible.
As a safety net. Yeah. I mean,
they are, but it's horrible because
You want to build it right.
They want to build it right, and the other
Costs.
problem is expensive.
Yeah.
Not only that, by the way, the CISOs don't have the back of that covered, that CYA insurance, cyber insurance policy, getting a lot more expensive. So the $1 million maybe not $1.5 million because cyber insurance just went up. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing.
I'm not
too.
making fun when I say it. It's.
I know. It's terrible. It's terrible.
But it's got to be table stakes.
Yeah, agreed.
Roy, we're almost at the top of the hour. This was great. Tell us where folks can find you and what you're going to be up to in the coming year, and we'll have you back for a checkpoint. So where can folks
and I
find
always appreciate talking to you guys. Always good to catch up. You can find us at avidthink.com, avidthink.com, and the coordinates are there. And upcoming 2023, probably more of the same in 2022. Hopefully less travel, but I'll still be at the usual conferences. Next big one for us is my favorite, MWC Barcelona.
MWC, woo! The big party. I'm probably going to that one here myself.
I know, with 70,000 of your closest friends, Brent.
Nice.
I don't know what the number's going to be this year. 80,000, 70,000.
Everybody's going this time.
Sounds
Forget it.
horrifying.
Let's go.
100,000.
100,000. The last
Pleasure.
one I went
It's
to
always a
had
pleasure.
was 100,000 people. It was bananas.
Yeah,
But it'll be
it's crazy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All
Excellent.
right, folks. Well, everybody out there, have a safe and happy holidays from us. We
Ho,
really
ho, ho.
appreciate all of our dozens of listeners out there. You guys are the best. You guys and girls are the best. And stay safe out there. Peace and love, folks.
All right.